All right. Welcome to episode 46 of Full Circle. I'm your host, Chad. I'm Cheddar Caveman on lots and lots of stuff. And we're going to talk about Circle. Actually, before we're going to talk about minions, but as they relate to Circle. So, news-wise, not a whole lot. The rules for Elias Gade and Kralix for Not Circle were released via an insider and an update to War Room. The minion CID rolls on, and that's probably going to be what leads us into hello chat. What leads us into our first topic, which is this week in the CID, they have decided to make some adjustments, potential adjustments. So these are not live; these may not happen. Just want to preface that. But they want to make some adjustments both to some models that are in CID as well as they're in CID, some that are in CID but already exist. So I want to talk a little bit about that and what that means for us in Circle Land. And then we may talk a little bit about we're assuming we have time, we're going to tackle, a model or two out of Circle, or possibly minion models that play for Circle and why you might play them. So that's what I want to talk about. So let's start with the newer one, because I think I may just talk about one of the minion models and then talk about it, assuming it gets the change that it's going to get. And yeah. So one of the major changes that there's a model in the CID called I'm actually going to attempt to just pull it up so that I don't misspeak. Oops. Hope if I can type. So it's called the Boil Master and Spirit Cauldron. And I'm not gonna do my usual read through the whole thing, but basically there's a large base model that is pushed by a gator. It can only move 5 inches. And then the cauldron itself, basically, it sort of works in a lot of ways like the Grimkin Death Knell, where it can pass out corpse tokens. It costs 5 points, by the way. The cauldron has 10 damage. The guy has 5. If the guy dies, I think it stops being moved. We can't advance, anyways. But it has magic ability, so it has a rule that can let you put corpses on models. It gets corpse tokens, then you can move them from it to another model, and then it also has the Bring Out Your Dead rule. So whenever a dude dies, living or undead model dies, enemy living or undead model in its command range, it can also gain, let's see, when an enemy, so any enemy model, living or undead model, and then any friendly living model, that's interesting, but, and it can have up to 5 corpse tokens. So, but the one thing this does that is a little bit different is it can just use a star action with its magic ability to gain D3 corpses, just for free. And then it also has Puppet Master, and it has a spell that's basically like a small gallows. It's actually pretty good. And it can boost with the tokens as well. So what that means is, so the change that happened to this model was originally it said friendly faction. Now it just says friendly. And that is pretty huge, if you've heard me talk at all about any of our models that can generate corpses, that can spend corpses that not necessarily generate. And these models include things like Chromac 2, Lord of the Feast, all the Death Wolves, all of the Thorn Ravagers, the White Mane, the Shaman, the Blood Pack, all models that want corpses, and corpses are always sort of this finicky thing to actually get, especially when you need them, right? Like you can kind of go in and get some sometimes. But you're not always then that model's kind of committed and you're not getting the value out of it. So, and this goes quite well with the recent change that allows you to bring a single unit or solo that's a minion in basically, in our case, all of our theme forces. So this option, and I have read at least one battle report where it did seem to play out pretty well. So the pot is a little bit slow moving, only 5 inches a turn, if I'm understanding it correctly. But you move up 5 inches, you get your D3 tokens. You maybe move up another 5 inches. You hand out some tokens. You get another D3. Maybe you picked up some from models that died, stuff like that. And in a pinch, of course, like Puppet Master's never a bad ability, and neither is any the Gallows type ability. Like, so it's got and it's Magic 7, so it's pretty good. And so it's like for 5 points, this is going to be a great option for us to consider in Devourer's Host. Certainly, even gaining the 7 to 8 tokens at the beginning. Like, now you can pay 5 points and you get another model that's giving you consistently D3 per turn. There is a little, potentially it's going to be a little bit finicky for the models, because all the models we have that want corpses also pick them up themselves. So you're not going to get, say you send in a Ravager. If that Ravager kills a model in melee, it's getting that corpse. And that's fine, just something you should realize with it. So this is a very exciting potential inclusion for us. If this goes live as it is, I'll absolutely buy one when it comes out. I'm pretty excited for that change, and I think it's a fine balance change. I mean, you're talking about a 5-point unit that doesn't benefit basically from any of our abilities because it's like almost everything's been typed as friendly faction. That can provide corpses, but this is the type of thing that can make sure Chromac 2 is topped off on corpses the whole game. Possibly that Lord of the Feast is topped off on corpses the whole game, which sort of is necessary probably for him to be relevant. Being able to put corpses on the thing you want, being able to take it in Wild Hunt to put them on, to put corpses on the Death Wolves where they normally have a much harder time getting them. Being able to put them on the Death Wolves even in the Devouring. So now, if you can find a way to heal them, the Death Wolves that is, and let's say we talked about like Kruger Hill, sort of the place I started this adventure with by stealing Colin Hill's list. So that maxes out on Tharn. So you get, I think, 8 corpses. Even I think including this, I think you'll still get at least 7. So you put 7 corpses on your Death Wolves, and so say you have 3. Somehow you get 3 out on each of them, and then they take 3 attacks each, spending 3 damage, but burning through all their corpses, and you're like, okay, well, now they're either dead next turn, or they're going to have, they're not going to be as effective in melee. Well, now, over the course of a couple more turns, you can throw another D3 corpses back on these guys if you can heal them. And the reason I say if you can heal them matters is because if you took 3 points of damage on one of them, you can only take 2 more before you die. Really, you can only take 1 more, that means. So you like to use more than 1 corpse defensively, you'll need to be able to heal them. Which things can do, like Blood Waivers, Shifting Stones, the objective, and there's probably some other stuff. So that could be really clutch. Even just for Ravagers, one of the big problems with them is if you put them on early, right, you've got to like really carefully sort of position ones back, and then the ones in the front that get corpses usually die. And if your enemy or if your opponent has the choice generally between killing a Ravager with a corpse and killing him without a corpse, they're going to kill the one with the corpse. So and they should. It makes sense. So being able to like load up, say, your Chieftain, who's also Mat 8 with corpses, or your White Mane, who you wouldn't always want to start the game with corpses necessarily, but like as the game goes on, you might give it to him. And then obviously Chromac 2, who can heal off of them, who can, I mean, that's the difference between him like safely camping or not. It's in some lists, like if you were bringing Chromac 2 to sort of be your answer to a lot of armor, this is going to allow you to use Chromac more aggressively to do that, because he can always have those corpses to start in on damage or boosting or whatever it is he needs to do. So I think these are all pretty good uses of this model. So it's something to keep an eye on. I think we've seen all the way through the January release where the Blind Water stuff begins, and I don't think it was in January, so February probably is when we'll see this as a model. Obviously CID is wrapping up, I think, Friday, so unless we see one more like rules update tomorrow, I didn't actually check, but I don't think that we saw one today, but I'm going to quick double check for you guys. Today's the 11th. No, last update was on the 9th, and that's where these changes came from. So, yeah, I'm very excited for this model. Yeah, so that's kind of all on that. The chat's already kind of getting ahead of me, but the next one I want to talk about, I'm just going to go, in this case, I'm just going to actually like go through the entry, is the Bog-Trog Mist Speaker. And this is a model that already exists, but it is in CID, and really the only change they're really talking about doing to it is this one in particular. Oh, I think it got a command bump actually as well. But let's just go through its stats real quick. So the Mist Speaker is a Bog-Trog Mist Speaker. It's a minion solo. It is speed 5, mat 5, defense 13, armor 14. It's amphibious. It's a small base model. Has a barbed hook that is a 2-inch range. That's a power and strength 10, and it's damage type magical. He's 5 wounds, costs 4 points, and he's FA 2. He plays for all of the Hordes factions that are not Grimkin. He has Prowl. He has veteran leader Bog-Trog to give them +1. And then he has a magic ability. His magic ability is 6. So I'm going to go over the two that kind of are the least relevant. He has Influence, which is a range 10 that lets you take control of a non-Warcaster, non-Warlock warrior model. And if he hits, that model makes a basic attack, which can be ranged or melee, and then Influence will expire. And you can only affect a model once per turn with that. And then he has Summon Vortex, which is exactly the same rule the Druids have. You center a cloud on them. It'll trigger the Prowl, -2 to attack rolls if you're an enemy model that stands in it. If he dies, the cloud goes away. The relevant ability to have this discussion around is Guidance. So Guidance is actually present in Scorn as well, but it is a SAR action that is range command. So currently in CID that's 8, but in live it's 6. And in live it says target friendly faction model. The change is that it will say target friendly model, which now makes this model worth consideration into circle lists. Anyways, if the model is in range, it gains Eyeless Sight, and its weapons gain damage type magical for 1 turn. The chat kind of, the comment in chat kind of alluded to this, but it does a few things for us. First, this is a way to hand out magic weapons to a model without having to bring a Pureblood into your list or a Thorn Ravager Shaman. It is only single model, so the Shaman is going to be a little bit better if you're bringing many units, but with sort of our theme focus on the Shaman's only in Devourer's Host, you know, this is an option you can put into any list. So there's one piece of consideration. The next is also not having to put a Pureblood in your list just for magic weapons. If you have something that you think is going to be like an answer to a Crix situation or possibly Protectorate, where they sometimes say no shooting and you can only hit them with non-magical stuff, this is going to give you an option for that as well. And you're talking for the low price of 4 points. Pretty good buy. Then the even more significant thing is providing Eyeless Sight. So this now stops. So Eyeless Sight in Mark III allows you to ignore clouds, concealment, and stealth. No longer do you ignore forests like you did in Mark 2. So those are the three things you ignore. Wormwood and Mosa already have this. But what this allows you to do is, if you have a shooting-centric list, right, this means that some of your models just, you're not, like they're not just going to be able to hide models from you. So things like the Celestial Fulcrum. Doesn't care about magic weapons. All of its guns are magical already. But if you're playing, say, a Fulcrum into, say, Haley 3 using the Trench or Cloud Wall, well, before you were like, well, I'm kind of boned with my range attacks because I'm not going to be able to get through this Cloud Wall until it's too late, basically, right? Or I'm going to have to do some weird shenanigans like move one of my own models into there and hope I don't kill it, but I can spray it and I can target, blah, blah, blah. And then the AoE doesn't work anyways because they're dug in. So, but now that model just says, I don't care about your claws. I'm just going to shoot through them. To a degree, it's going to be an alternative to a Moonhound that has to actually go out and remove stealth from a model. This is going to allow you to sort of handle that on the other side by just granting eyeless sight to things to ignore stealth. You can put it on, here's a weird interaction, you can put that on a Gallows Grove if you want your spells to be able to be arced through clouds. Be able to put it on your caster is really important. Again, you can get through clouds. You can also ignore stealth. This starts to allow some of our other casters to be used kind of as spot removal potentially for troublesome support solos that normally are able to avoid this because they have stealth, which is a really strong ability for them. Especially those with like range at least like 10 spells. And obviously ones that were not Wormwood or Mosar who could already do that. It's particularly good on anybody with a quality ranged attack. So this is very interesting on Tanith. Very interesting on Kruger 2. It's very interesting potentially on Una 2. Her gun is good. It's not as amazing. But again, it's range 14, so now she can start targeting, you know, like, again, that spot removal aspect, right? A boosted pot 10 or something. And things like that. So this is a really small change. And, like, don't get me wrong, this is a very exciting change. I think this is something that will make it in the list. I think it's now a model that I would say you should go out if this change goes through, and I would wait until it does if you haven't bought one already. But this is something now where I would say having one of these in your collection is going to be valuable. It's not an expensive piece. It's not a piece that will make every list. But when you know when you've got 4 points and you have a list that can benefit from that stuff, or a particular matchup where certain things have been problematic, I think this piece is going to be very valuable. Both for magic weapons and for the removal of stealth and concealment and whatnot. We have a lot of casters that like throwing spells around. We have a lot of casters that have, we have a number of casters with ranged attacks, things like that. Even for charges, being able to get eyeless sight can be valuable, right? Charge through clouds or something. So that's not, I wouldn't necessarily say that like Chromac 2, for example, strikes me as somebody who would want one of these, but you know, some of the ones I listed, I think absolutely might consider it. Either of the Morvanas it's actually kind of compelling with as well. They both have kind of longish range spells. So that's kind of the situation with the Misspeaker. I don't have a whole lot more to say about him. I don't want to kind of like make a little thing into a huge thing, but I think, again, it's a piece you're going to want to have in your collection. It's a solo you're going to start to consider as your bonus model for some of these situations. I'm going to hit on a couple more in here. I'm going to kind of just try to go quick. There we go. I'm going to mention Linus Wesselbaum and Adria Liorer. I don't know how to say her name. And not much changed with them, but a couple little things did change. They were really cool in Mark II, and they kind of are a lot less cool in what they do in Mark III, but at least a little clearer in the rules, because the rules of Mark II are super confusing. But the change that is being tested, and I'm not going to necessarily go. I'm going to just sort of. They both have like sword and a gun, and they're mediocre with using them. They're 5 points for a 2 model unit. But like Linus is sort of like the book nerd, and Edria is a wizard. And the thing they do right now is Linus can use this ability Applied Knowledge, which lets you choose which column suffers damage when you target something that has columns. And Edria had like a random Zot spell, and then she had Wind Barrier to help keep them safe, and then she had Zephyr so they can move up further. Or back, I guess. And then, like I said, they both had guns and swords. And but the changes are basically that Linus is now going to get an ability called First Aid, which is heal D3 for any living model he goes in base with. So that potentially has some interesting applications. It's not super fantastic, but it's not terrible. And then her change is the Zot spell she had is going to turn into Wind Burst, which is a range 10 AoE 4, POW 12 magic attack, and cloud effects overlapping the AoE will expire. And she has True Sight, so she can sort of position that however she wants back into a cloud. Like I said, I don't want to go into huge details with this, but that's a more interesting, a much more interesting list that unit. Sorry, you may have a specialized way. It might be worth testing. I just think it's now that there's some like stuff that's not just faction. I think it's probably worth keeping an eye on. I'm not as excited for this as I am for like the Boil, but yeah, it's pretty decent. I want to jump back real quick to the Mist Speaker. Chat did point out that with Una 1, the Storm Raptor with this, there is no place on the board that you can hide from it. You can't be behind clouds, you can't be behind forests, you can't be behind people, you can't have stealth, nothing. Just that's how it is. Also mentioned for charges on the Stalker, since there's Prowl and Hunter, can be pretty good. Has Tracker in Wild Hunt. Anyways, so but Linus and Edria, some interesting changes. There might be a list that it makes sense to have them in. Again, having spells, you get sort of an incorporeal answer. Removing clouds, I think there's a lot of clouds out there, so having some more counterplay for that is good. It might be bad for us since we also have that, but I just wanted to give them a mention. I don't think I've ever talked about this. I apologize. I don't actually have my spreadsheet open where I keep track of what I've talked about, but the Throg is also a model that's gone through changes, and actually we may just power through talking about him. So he's a minion solo. He's speed 6, mat 7, defense 13, armor 16, command 7, FA 2, costs 5 points. He's a medium base solo with 8 wounds. He plays for all the non-Grimkin Hordes factions. He has currently he has advanced deployment, amphibious, and spell ward. He picked up Pathfinder and Prowl in the CID. And then he also has a rule called Arcane Consumption, which is when an enemy model declares it's casting a spell while in his command range, that model will immediately suffer D3 damage points. The Throg can remove D3 from his damage, and the spellcaster, and if the spellcaster dies, the spell doesn't happen. So at command 7, a little bit, I don't know how often that one will come up. And then he has 3 melee attacks. They're all 1-inch range. 2 of them are POW 12. 1 of them is POW 13. They're magic damage, and they have arcane interference, which is when Throg hits Another model with the weapon, upkeep spells and animai in the model will expire. It loses focus points that are on it, and if he hits a warjack with it, the warjack is disrupted. And that's like I said on all 3 attacks. So I think he's always been speed 6, but if he's not, so now he's speed 6, so he threatens 10 inches. We have less ways of speeding him up, just because Spell Ward doesn't let us like do things like telekinesis, which is often one of the ways that I would suggest speeding up a minion model where we don't have a lot of other buffs for. But Hunter's Mark potentially is something that works. And the reason I point him out is we talked a lot about Eilish when he was released and where he may go and how his final rules worked out. And the Throg does a lot of what Eilish does, only he has to do it in melee. And he has to hit. So Mat 7 certainly factors in there. That can be good or bad. But he also he does melee work, right? So you've got two power 12s and a power 13. Yeah. That's not nothing. He also does disruption on those attacks. And so this is the rule that Iris 2 had in Mark 2, where she would knock focus off of a caster. And the Throg was also always like, well, that's great, but he's got to be in melee with your caster. That's never going to happen. It's probably still not going to really happen. But disruption on those attacks can be actually very critical. There are still a decent number of lists playing a decent number of jacks. There's also more ways to hide this guy with Prowl, assuming it keeps Prowl and Pathfinder, which I don't see any reason it's not going to. I think those are sort of some of the changes that a model like this needed to sort of safely get to where it needs to be on the table. And Prowl is particularly interesting for for Gatorman models that have Amphibious, because he can trigger it both in forests and in water features. So that just provides sort of some more compelling ways to deliver him. And then, again, if you can get him into a warjack or 2, you might just put it in a situation where those warjacks are basically just dead. And for 5 points, again, it can slot into a solo spot not too badly. You may have to plan a little bit for it, but I think it, again, like depending on what your list is aiming to do, and it's still going to remove upkeeps also. It's like if they send in a Arcane Shielded Stormwall, and you can keep this guy safe to sort of be a counter hit, he hits the Stormwall. You can't disrupt it because it's a Colossal, but hits the Stormwall, knocks that Arcane Shield off, and you're good to go. And without affecting your upkeeps. So it's, again, another model to watch. I would say make sure these rules go through. When it comes out, it might be something worth testing for you. I'm trying to think. Just another quick mention. The Croak Hunter that's out there, mostly worth note here is they're currently testing Weaken on his both melee and range attacks. And he's Mat 6 with Gang Fighter and Rat 6. So that means you... Weaken is a living model, suffers -2 strength and defense. So again, if you're going into certain types of lists, like being able to get either of those debuffs can be pretty critical. I'm not going to go all over what he does. Just something to look out for. And it's currently being tested at 3 points, which is another good slot. Just trying to see. There's some changes to the Gatorman Witch Doctor, but I don't think they're going to be any to really excite us too much in faction. And actually, I think Long Chops is out there. I'm going to revisit him when he's closer to release. I'm not super over the top about this, but he does have a range 12 power 14 gun, so it's interesting. I need some more time to think about the Gatorman Husk, but again, it's another 3-point ambush model that has some pretty high disruption, so there might be something there as your sort of like off model. And then the one more I'll mention, and then we're going to go maybe do an actual circle model, is the Croak Trappers. So they're Speed 6, Mat 5, Rat 6, Defense 13, Armor 13, Command 5, FA 2. They're just a two model unit for 5 points, small base, play for all of the Horde's factions, but Krumkin. And they have AD, Amphibious, they're immune to corrosion. They have Pathfinder, they have Prowl, and they have Reposition 3. And then they have like a POW 8 half-inch melee hand weapon. And then they have a Net, which is range 4, AoE 3, but if they hit a model, it's knocked down. Again, nothing super over the top here, but like they are a decently cheap unit. So for some of those lists that really just need one more unit for scoring purposes, they're worth considering. And they do knock down just by clipping a model with an AoE. So and at range 4, you can pretty much I think at range 4 they can't, if they're in range of a small base model at range 4, I believe they cannot miss that model. So it's very interesting, right? And obviously being able to just auto knock down something that could be pretty good. But that's really about it for that. I just wanted to highlight them pretty quick. One thing that could end up being sort of interesting is the Void Leech is a weapon attachment, and since the Boil is a unit, and there's also a few other units, and it is a living model, unless I'm missing something. Yep. You can always attach up to 3 weapon attachments to something. So you could bring the Boil and then bring 3 of these guys. And they have some like anti-magic stuff that you could use on them, but you can also just bring them along to be souls. And a point per model is about as cheap as you can get these days, especially ones that have souls and corpses. So that could be pretty interesting with somebody like Wormwood, where you can get the souls and then turn them into corpses for the pot, and turn them into souls for the tree, and yeah. And for only 3 points, like I said, that's going to be a pretty good deal. And from time to time, if you know that they may throw some spells at your pot, you can just leave one of them alive, and no problem. So it's kind of cute, but just worth mentioning. And I'm basically just, they're 1 point weapon attachments, so they don't really do anything too terribly exciting. All right, let me double check, see if there's anything, some chat going on. Okay, no, nothing else in chat at the moment. So that's sort of like going through a few more of the minions out there, and I think we have time to do a more official circle thing. So one of the warlocks, and I've actually been looking at this one that I have not gone through, is none other than Morvana the Autumn Blade, Morvana 1. So let's just go through what she does. She is speed 6, strength 5, mat 6, rat 4, defense 15, armor 13, command 9. She has Pathfinder, she's a small base model. She is fury 7. She has 14 damage boxes, 28 war beast points. She's a force character. She has a melee weapon called Equinox, which is 2-inch range, power and strength 12, damage type magical weapon. And then she also has Sacrificial Pawn, Faction Warrior, and just to read over that, when this model is directly hit by an enemy range attack, you can have one friendly, non-incorporeal Faction Warrior model within 3 inches of it directly hit instead. That model is automatically hit and suffers all damage and effects. And then she also has the rule Vital Magic. When a spell or special rule would cause one or more of this model's upkeep spells to expire, this model can keep one or more of its upkeep spells in play by suffering D3 damage points for each spell kept in play. And then her spell list, and pretty much most of this is pretty unique. So first she has Eruption of Life, which is a 3-cost, range 10, power 13, offensive spell. On duration it says star, and you'll see why in a second. If this attack destroys, important note there on destroy, a living or undead enemy model, center a 3-inch AoE on the destroyed model, then remove that model from play. The AoE is forest terrain that remains in play for 1 round. Enemy models in the AoE, when it is put into play, are hit and suffer an unboostable power 13 blast damage roll. This damage is not considered to have been caused by an effect, but by an attack. She has Harvest, which is a 3-cost, range self, control area, upkeep. It's not offensive. When a living or undead enemy model is destroyed in the spellcaster's control range, the spellcaster can gain 1 fury point. The spellcaster's fury point total cannot exceed its fury as a result of harvest. Then there's Influence, which is a 2-cost range 10 offensive spell. I just said it with the Misspeaker. It's the same spell. Take control of target enemy non-warcaster, non-warlock warrior model. The model immediately makes 1 basic attack, and then Influence expires. The model can be affected by Influence only once per turn. She has Regrowth, which is a 4-cost, range 6 upkeep non-offensive spell. Target friendly faction unit. During your control phase, the spellcaster can spend fury points to return 1 destroyed living small-based grunt from that unit to play for each fury spent. A returned grunt must be placed in the spellcaster's control range in formation in it within 3 inches of another model in this unit. The grunt is returned with 1 unmarked damage box and must forfeit its combat action the turn is put into play. And finally, she has Restoration, another 2-cost, range 6, friendly upkeep. Target friendly faction model / unit gains +2 armor. Models are not affected by Restoration while out of formation. When the spell is upkept during control phase, the spellcaster can remove 1 damage point for each friendly model affected by Restoration within 1 inch of it. And then her feat is called Seeds of Destruction. When a friendly faction model destroys a living or undead enemy model with a melee attack while in her control range this turn, center a 3-inch AoE on the destroyed model. Then remove the destroyed model from play. The AoE is a force train that remains in play for 1 round. Enemy models in the AoE, when it is put into play, are hit and suffer an unboostable power 13 blast damage roll, and the damage is not considered to have been caused by an attack. That was many words. Important note: the first thing I want to talk about is her feat and Eruption of Life. I specifically want to point this out because it gets very confused, and it was worded a little differently in Mark II. But the way it is worded, it says the model is destroyed. It does not trigger the RFP effect until the destroyed effect happens. That means that other things that trigger on destroyed, say for example getting corpses or Battle Wizard or I can't think of another one. Anything like that will happen. Doesn't matter for Lightning Strike anymore because that's lets you remove from play anyways. But things like that, anything that triggers on destroyed will still trigger, and then the model will still be removed from play. So just something to keep in mind. And the reason for that is it's necessary for her spell Harvest to work. Otherwise, it doesn't really function, right? Because she's going to use a spell to kill a dude, and she needs it to like get that fury back, and she's not going to be able to. So that's the first thing I want to mention. And that spell and her feat function the exact same way. The only difference is the trigger is melee attack for her feat, and for her spell, it's a spell. So that's the first thing. The next thing is one of the two big changes affected her coming from Mark II to Mark III. If you did that transition, so. First, I'll talk about the downside. So regrowth, like most other recursion things in the game, now works such that the models that are coming back are not getting combat action. So before, you used to do a lot of things with her where you would put the models back, they could aim and do stuff like that and throw and get attacks, and they were very effective. Now the effectiveness of it is going to be based more on just you having to position smartly and get advantage out of that recursion just by sort of layering and how it works, right? So whatever unit you're using, you kind of want to make sure you're not exposing too many of those models. So let's say it's blood trackers in theory. You may want to send like 4 to 6 of the blood trackers in some sort of offensive way that maybe exposes them more than you'd like, but an okay amount. And then you want to have those next like 4 to 6 or however many you didn't send in, like sort of ready to act the next turn, so that you can bring back the those few that were killed can come back, sort of and be the next wave, and you can kind of keep rolling waves in. turn over turn. And over time, then eventually end up in this situation where if you're attritioning them sufficiently, you're just going to end up with more models than them as the game starts to wind down. And that's how you'll sort of, and that's sort of like one of her main plays. So that's a big difference. The other thing is she was one of the casters in Mark II. She kind of like just disappeared entirely from competitive pairings because we kept getting more and more and more and more recursion. Purification and upkeep removal that entered into the game, and basically she was reliant both on like harvest, and you could do without the armor spell to a degree, but harvest and regrowth both are like completely required to her kit for it to work. And like if you played her and you had those, and like I said, you had the better recursion and stuff, so like if you played her and you had those and they didn't have an answer to those, you could grind out most games if you were pretty good at playing her. And if they did have it, she just like fell flat on her face because she just couldn't do anything. I mean, she had a POW 13 nuke, but like the thing that you were bringing her to do, she just didn't do. So it was kind of like playing with the most generic caster you could imagine. So the inclusion of Vital Magic, where she can now just choose to take a D3 of damage instead, is actually really huge. That means you can do things like put the armor buff on, say, a Woldwrath, and it will never ever get removed unless she for some reason takes that many D3s of damage. Her upkeep harvest, her upkeep, like all those upkeeps that are very vital to her playstyle, she can choose to keep in play when she needs to now. It does have a cost, right? D3's damage to a pretty frail warlock is not nothing, but that's the situation. So the other thing is, so she does bring a remove from play option, which will still turn off. It will turn. I'd have to look. Because of the weird timing with Destroyed and stuff, I think it usually will still stop souls from being generated. But it also will provide you with, like, it will stop recursion. So, like, Ghostfleet, for example, she's fantastic at that because between her feet and Eruption, you can start trying to tag those troublesome leader models, get them out of there, and you're good to go. That's another good tactic to attempt into like Trollbloods for the same reason. If you can RFP the Krill Stone, it's sad times for them. Stuff like that. So that's another very important part of her spell. Influence is an interesting spell now that it can make a ranged attack. Watch out for your opponent who brought weapon crews, because influencing that cannon in Khador or I'm trying to think which ones are played. The one in Grimkin doesn't really have an attack, so that's not a good example. Anyways, any of the weapon crews that have some pretty significant firepower behind a cannon, being able to influence that and shoot into their own stuff can be really strong. And watch out for anything that has like an effect on their ranged attack, because it's still a basic ranged attack. You still get to choose that effect. So like if they have an Iris 1 and they put it in a spot where you can shoot, I don't believe it lets them ignore. They still have to shoot in the direction of their face, I believe. Yeah, they don't change facing. So if they have like an Iris 1 and screw up their placement, you just shoot their caster so they don't have any focus anymore. That'd be sad for them. Things like that. So look for things like that. Don't look too hard for that. So it's not a super efficient use of Fury, but sometimes it's going to be a very good use of Fury. Her feat is sort of interesting. I need to play some games with her. It was always kind of tough to get that feat to sort of work timing-wise really well with her, but I think if it does, it can be very strong. Obviously, Forest templates are good. RFP is good. It also lets you do a lot of damage into a lot of grouped-up models. And POW 13s are big enough that you're now going to kill some pretty high armored stuff reliably. Like armor 18, you're killing with 6s. And infantry really has to try pretty hard to get much higher than that armor-wise. And then there's some, in the chat, there's some conversation on what the best theme might be for her. And the first thing I'm going to say is one of the... she's an infantry caster. Her spells are very focused on infantry and very sort of focused on infantry to a degree, infantry into more infantry. She doesn't have a damage bonus. She doesn't have an accuracy bonus, but she does have the ability to keep recurring models for a very long time, and restoration being defensive. And with Sack Pawn, she's also very, very resilient to shooting. Her army may not be. That's sort of going to be reliant on, she can give +2 armor to a unit, and maybe the placement of forests with eruptions of life and such, and depending on the warrior model she brings. But it's going to be very reliant on what you want to do. So I think the 3 infantry focused themes for her all have potential. That being Secret Masters, Devourer's Host, and the Wild Hunt. They're all going to play a little bit differently. They're all going to have a different sort of recursion target. Keep in mind it can only be small base models, because if we could recur cavalry, we would. And if we could recur Ravagers, we would. You can't do that. They're all great targets for the +2 armor spell, though. The comment in the chat is talking about how they don't think that Secret Masters is always the best theme, but I think it is a very viable theme. So if you follow Privateer Press posting, when this theme came out, Will Pagani's article on the Insider talked about a list with Secret Masters that ran 2 units of Druids and a unit of Mistriders. And the one reason that that theme is very strong is A, you can bring Gatorman Boker behind and Shamblers behind them, or some other minion unit potentially, although I think the Gatorman's the best one. And you can have them also being bullet sponges for your Druids. So now you've got this cloud wall that can move up and keep whatever you want safe in your army. You've got the Mistriders that are a very good target for the +2 armor spell, and you've got some models that will probably die so that the Shamblers can keep coming back and keep continuing to be bullet sponges. One of the only times, too, where you may actually want to consider bringing, and again, depending on if its rules change, the Gatorman Witch Doctor to tough that unit specifically, because you can still do it to minion units, just because that's going to, again, give you a little bit more sack pawns for your, which you get in Secret Masters. And then you can keep Morvana safe, because between she can sack pawn to the minions, she can sack pawn to the warrior models. I mean, unless you're drifting blast damage onto her, which you should look out for, or using like Electro Leaps, which you should also look out for, you can pretty reliably stop a lot of this wrapping. And Druids are particularly difficult to deal with, because they can give themselves they have problem. They can cause themselves to get stealth. So they have stealth, they have Sacred Ward, they're immune, and they can be immune to every damage type in the game. So, and then if you do manage to finally hit one of the ranged attack, they're going to sack pawn that. And if you finally get through all of that, if you have half-inch melee and you step into their cloud, you're also -2 to hit. So like, all of these things happen, and then you finally kill like 2, and then Morvana's like, well, they're back. Here you go. And then Mistriders go to 14-17 with the arm spell. Will was bringing some like Wold Wardens who could Geomancy the spell, so they sort of get a ranged attack that way. They can also sort of, if they can kill some infantry models, they may get harvests going sooner for her, which is sort of sometimes an order of operations nightmare. So that's a pretty interesting list. It's something I actually do. It's taken me a little bit to let it sink into my brain, but I want to if I have time, I want to try that list out, see what's there. My next favorite personally is also Devourer's Host, and that's because I think Blood Weavers or Blood Trackers are also a very good target for regrowth. Blood Trackers probably still being the best target for it that we have. They're not quite what they were in Mark 2, because of the things I was saying where they don't get to act when they come back, because you used to be able to get a lot of like really cool like aims and stuff out of them. But they're still POW 9 Weapon Masters, even with their ranged attack, and Prey takes them up to POW 11. So like they're pretty good. They're speed 7. They're real fast. They have stealth. They don't like blast damage, of course, at that. But again, you can kind of do what I was saying, right? You have 10 of them, 11 with Nuala. You can keep, making sure that slowly you're sort of whittling away at them and have this unit that just can't really go anywhere. I think Ravagers or Death Wolves are strong potential targets for Restoration. Getorix, if you want to do the list I built, basically just like transplanted my Kruger 1 list into Morvana, and you can put the armor spell out there, and then you do Getorix, who also then can benefit from the armor spell, because he can do his own spine growth and get the armor spell and be armor 21. So he can be a 14/21 if you need him to be. And that armor, like I said, that armor buff can't go away. So I think you want to like keep him back like you would have anyways with Kruger, but then once you put him in there, you might be the time to cycle that buff around. Or like I said, the Death Wolves being 14/16 with their death magic rule, or it's not called death magic, but you get the idea. I think with any of the lists with the minion unit option now, that Shamblers are worth considering, because if you have a unit that's dying that Morvana's putting the models back for, they still do be destroyed, and then you fill up the corpses on the poker, and then you get more zombies, and that's always good. I have not played a lot of Wild Hunt, but I would say you possibly can be regrowing Reeves or Wolves. You're going to kind of want to do the same thing. The only reason I don't like Wolves is because they're really the best on their mini feat turn, and you only get one of those. But being able to keep your Reeves up at a higher number of attacks is always good. Skinwalkers are something I would consider in that list, because giving them +2 armor is very, very good. Once they get stuck in, they're unyielding, and then, so they go up to their 12/20s with 8 wounds, and they can heal themselves turn over turn, so they can be real assholes in zones or at jamming heavies and things like that, or jamming up like ranged models and stuff. In general, I don't think, like, Morvana's not going to ever be your answer to high armor. She's not, and she may not even answer like certain specific things. She historically was good into Legion, although Legion has changed quite a bit on what they're playing. Like, she was the biggest answer to Lilith 2 in Mark 2, but she didn't get a lot of play because Veil 2 happened and Purification, and then you just lose as Morvana. Worth mentioning, somebody said the Woldwrath, another untargetable +2 armor buff on that model is fantastic. So definitely not a bad idea there. A little bit different of a list. I would say if you're in Secret Masters, the Fulcrum's a compelling piece for Secret Masters, but I personally would not bring a huge base with that, because you're probably going to be using your druids to hide stuff, and you can't hide huge bases. So it's kind of a little anti-synergy if you were going to try that. She's also in the CID, so or sorry, not CID, not that. ADR, too many acronyms. And so if you're playing in Champions, I actually would consider her right now, because I think there's a lot more infantry being played, and of the options in there, she's one of the better ones into the ranged armies that you may see because of Sakbon. And if you kind of take their assassination off the table, make them focus on other things, hopefully you can get your recursion going and jam them, and there's something to be played there. She's not a warlock you're just going to sit down and have like an obvious game with. You need to take advantage of all the things she can do. You need to know when to do which one when. You need to look at your list a lot and make sure that you have all the pieces that you want and what they're doing. Yeah. So I'm currently sort of thinking I want to try her out. I played into Ghost Fleet last week. I didn't really love the way my Wormwood list played, and so one of the things I'm considering is whether or not she, either in the non-Wild Hunt theme forces that we talked about, if there's enough game into both Ghost Fleet and other Crix answers, and then see where else she maybe has game. Largely, I don't see her as a super I basically see her as okay when you know you can grind through the opponent and they're not going to have too much armor for you to deal with. I mean, some is okay because you know, depending on the way you constructed your list, you can work your way through it. The Wold Wardens with the +2 strength now can still do okay. The Ravagers still do okay. You're gonna have like a Getorix in that build, so he's gonna do fine. Important to note, you can always bring Brownos with her. Gives you a little more healing. I don't know that he's super synergizes with her game plan, but he is interesting. I'm not at the moment eyeballing him for these lists, but maybe. Yep, that's pretty much it on that. So that's Morvana 1. We'll see if she picks up and play at all. She doesn't seem to be the most looked at caster in Circle, and that's fine. I think there are plenty of different ways to do sort of similar tasks. But one of the things I do like about her is she does bring some pretty good spells, some pretty good RFP options, and both the Morvanas still probably have some of the best, certainly in faction, but some in the game, even some of the best attrition games. So, yeah, so that's all. That's Morvana 1. And we've been going for about an hour here even. So we're gonna wrap it up there. Quick shout out to sponsors, Muso Minis. They keep letting me post stuff on their website, and I'm gonna keep being happy about it. They also make some pretty cool widgets and terrain. Flat terrain, certainly. I think they're trying to branch into some more 3D terrain. I'm looking forward to seeing them at War Machine Weekend. Catch up. So check them out if you're looking for widgets and stuff, or check them out because I'll have my video posted there. And then also, of course, I like to thank Griffin's Roost Painting, who paints all of my pretty models. And if you want pretty models painted, well, you can check them out at griffinsroostpainting.com or on Facebook at Griffin's Roost Painting. And you might be able to get some pretty models too. Anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.